Well, hi, everybody. I'm Andy Carr. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Development with Feed My Starving Children. And we are so glad that you have joined us here to get an update and information on what Feed My Starving Children is doing during this COVID-19 crisis. So with that, I'm going to turn the screen over to Mark Crea.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And welcome, everyone. We can't say enough about how you have helped us continue to feed God's kids. You have blessed us. You continue to do that. I would tell you, God wants his children fed. And that's our number one goal at Feed My Starving Children, to find a way to continue to do that. On March 16th, FMSC stopped all of its volunteers packing. What that did is stop us from producing 30 million meals each month. So as of the 16th of March, that went to zero. One of the amazing things about Feed My Starving Children and our staff is we continue, and the world we work in, it's about having a plan B all the time. So from the point we stopped production with volunteers, we immediately began to look for other ways to produce meals. And within 9 days of the 16th of March, we began some machine packing. And that was our ability to start to produce some food in some way, to put some food back into the pipeline. So you're going to see here, as we look at our ways to produce meals, the first was to put all the meals in one bag in one box. And we could send that to partners who have orphanages and others where they're opening 36 bags of food anyways. And so that's on its way. Then in addition to the other manufacturers that are bagging up our food, and that's starting here in the next week or two, that production, we have also been engaged with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. They're producing food and they're doing 60, 70,000 meals. We hope to get up to a couple 100,000 meals a week with them, but it seems to be working well, and that we can maybe expand that to other prisons as well. Anything to keep us moving until we can get you back into the packing room. We are not giving up on our 370 million meals as a goal for this year. We hope by the end of this month, by the end of May now, that we will be back to 15 million meals by machine a month. Now that's half of what we need, but it's something. It's moving the needle. It's getting food out to there. Unfortunately, machine packing is more expensive. We don't have those beautiful volunteers producing the meals, so it's costing us an additional 5 cents a meal to produce these meals. And as we look at the next 3 months, that's going to cost Feed My Starving Children, in addition to the ingredients and all of those normal costs, an additional 5 cents a meal. That's $2.2 million. What our partners, and we're in touch with them every day, what they're telling us, and these are some shots from Haiti. These were just taken as our partners are still distributing this food. They're concerned about COVID-19. I will tell you, they're most concerned about kids not dying from COVID-19 as much as dying from starvation. That's their biggest concern. So we need to do everything possible to continue to feed God's kids.
Well, thank you, Mark, for giving us that information and update. And I know just as we've talked with the executive team and just the pressure that there is that we hear from our partners around the world to continue to get this food produced. Matt, could you give this group kind of a little bit of insight as to what we're hearing from people around the world and some of the work that's being done on the supply chain to keep these meals flowing?
Well, so far this year, we shipped 375 shipments, or roughly 101 million meals. Last April, 2019 April, we shipped 124 shipments. This April, we shipped 28. That's a 26 million meal deficit. We've been working really closely, though, with some of our bigger partners who use food pretty quick. And everybody is just, I would say, scampering because there's a total global disruption. But our partners are counting on us. That's what I can tell you tonight from the phone calls we've had with all our partners. They're really counting on us. They're counting on these machine packed meals to bridge the gap to when volunteers could come back. I also want to talk about what's coming. So the World Food Program has put out a report. It's the 2020 Global Report on Food Crisis. Last year at this time, they had earmarked 135 million people would be suffering from acute hunger by the end of the year. This year, it's 265 million. This report spans 55 countries, and basically most of that hunger is situated in Africa and the Middle East. So like Mark said, we're working as hard as we can. We're fighting for every meal to get it to our partners.
Well, thank you, Matt. I know we hear, almost daily from you and your staff as we continue to work with our donors and supporters to explain to them the need for these meals around the globe and some of the challenges that are being undertaken. I've talked to some of our partners in the Philippines, and I've got some pictures here in Manila where they're out doing the work in these communities, visiting out into these ultra poor places where they're not able to go out and do their daily work or scavenge for food. And they're telling us more and more that meals are needed. Mark touched on the fact that there's additional cost to being able to produce these meals for us. And we're so grateful for the people who have stayed faithful and generous to what they've done working with Feed My Starving Children. Dan Ragna, who is our finance guy, our CFO, can you give a little bit of insight as to what's going on with the financial situation here at Feed My Starving Children?
What I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about this past year. The history of Feed My Starving Children is really all about God's provision and protection. And if you've talked to Mark Crea, Annie, you've heard some of those stories. And this past year was really no different. I've told family and friends that the second half of this past year was the best example I've seen of God's blessing and provision for FMSC, especially from a financial perspective. This pandemic was no surprise to God. He was preparing FMSC during the last 6 months of this past year. As noted, we ended the fiscal year in a much better cash position than the prior year, 86 days of cash on hand versus 63 in the year previous. That equated to $3.5 million more. March is the first month of our fiscal year. Yes, we do have kind of an odd fiscal year. With the onset of COVID-19, we shut down production, as you heard, halfway through March. And so contributions from volunteers coming into our sites basically went to zero. And scheduled mobile pack events around the country and the revenue associated with them went to zero. Despite that, we had a strong month in revenue. We actually met our budgeted revenue goal for the month, largely on the strength of $1 million gift, another huge blessing. In April, we began to see the impact of lost revenue, volunteers not coming into our sites, and no mobile pack events. That said, we did receive a couple of six-figure gifts. We saw an uptick in online donations, which was not surprising with everyone being at home. So what is our forecast or outlook for the remainder of this fiscal year? Needless to say, it's ever evolving. We have multiple scenarios that we've run. We continue to update those scenarios as we learn and adapt each week. Since the onset of this pandemic, we have focused our attention on the next 3 to 4 months. And our theme has really been around stabilization. And we're conserving cash as much as possible to produce more food. Right now, our current forecast projects a 33% reduction in revenue over the course of this fiscal year from what we had budgeted for the year. This obviously directly impacts the number of meals we can produce and our staffing structure. The scenario we are currently operating under has us about 100 million meals short of the original 370 million meals for this fiscal year. And you've heard Mark say we're not giving up on that 370 million meals yet. While we've moderated our forecast, we still desperately need donors to partner with us and see us through this pandemic. Our ability to reach our original goals for this year is only governed by resources provided by God through donors like you.
Well, thank you, Dan. I thank you for the insight and wisdom that you give. We continue to just strive to find the ways that we can do this work. And Mark, I know that we've been asked by people, what does it look like into the future? What kind of things are you doing? You mentioned the fact that we've turned to some machine packing. We've engaged with the prisons, but people are saying, what are we thinking about people coming back in the packing room?
We've got a team of staff that are working with the health departments and others. And since we're in multiple states, depending on what happens in the different states, timing is going to be different. And so we're looking at how do we, and we're going to start with staff, bring some staff back, start to do some production with social distancing. We've been testing that already. What will they allow for volunteers to come back? Will we be at quarter capacity, half capacity, having people spread out? All of those things are being worked on right now. Our hope is that we can get back to some production ourselves. The sooner the better. For the rest of this year and maybe beyond that, I think we're going to continue to need to engage some amount of machine packing in addition to the volunteering. We have access to the raw ingredients. What will allow us to feed all those kids we've made promises to is, do we have the resources to produce those meals? If we do, we will.
Well, Mark, you bring up a good point. And Matt, I'm going to call on you. A few people have asked about what are we hearing from our partners across the globe as far as their ability to access food and why this kind of food is so important to them.
The truth of the matter is that in most of the places we ship food to, even if they have the cash, the availability to get this kind of food is not there. The ability for them to buy rice or buy some other things is partially there for most of them, but nowhere near the kind of food, the volume, or the health impact that this food has. A lot of the people eat our food are day laborers. They can't go out and work for a wage that they to go buy food. So very dependent on Feed My Starving Children and the blessings that God gives us through our donors and volunteers.
Well, thank you, Matt. I know that we talk about the fact that this is nutrition that's being sent to so many of these countries that maybe have access to a few calories here and there, but the difference that this food makes. And for all of our supporters who have been familiar coming into our packing rooms and seeing the stories of the kids like Nelson and Lauza and Emma and kids all over the world, that this food is really special. But we're just hearing over and over and over, please, we need more of these meals. Dan, can I ask you for a minute? I know that we've seen a couple of things happen as a result of the CARE Act and on the contribution side. There's a couple of things that maybe I would ask you if you can give us some clarity. There's been talk of that there's a $300 above the line, $600 per couple donation. Could you tell us a little bit about what you know? I know it's not as tax advice, but what can you tell us about what's going on with that right now?
So you mentioned the $300 deduction credit for non-itemizers. So people that don't itemize on their tax return can deduct up to $300 in 2020 and receive credit against their taxable income for that. As it relates to individuals as well, there's typically a 60% limit of adjusted gross income. That has been lifted, and so you can deduct up to 100% of adjusted gross income for this particular calendar year 2020. And then corporations can also deduct a little bit more from their taxable income than they were able to in the past, going from 10% up to 25%. Those are the aspects of the act that I'm aware of at this point.
As we look at a couple of the other questions that come in, I'm going to kind of lump a couple of them together. We were asked, is there going to be a limitation to the amount of food that you're able to ship during these emergency times? We are only limited by the funding that we're able to come up to provide these meals. Matt's team has done an incredible job of sourcing and feel that we would be able to increase the number of meals that would be produced via technology like machine packing. And as we look at other alternative ways, but the thing that's going to keep us from being able to produce even more food in this crisis is going to be our ability to fund those meals. And so we're just trusting that God is going to bring those funds to bear, and that we are going to be able to move forward in doing that. So, Mark, what would you want to say to our group of supporters from your experience of what you've seen in your time here with Feed My Starving Children, and what we think this future is going to look like? What would you want to say as we kind of head out here?
This is not a surprise to the Lord. He understands that. He just asks us to step out in faith. These partners, these children, these moms, this food is the difference between life and death for them. Partners who say nothing else matters to us. Of all the programs, of all the other things, we know that we like to do all the other sustainable things. None of that matters right now. Food, and your food, is the only thing that matters to get us through this time. And that's what we're going to do. And I know so many of you have been so generous. I can't thank you enough for that. I ask you again to consider helping us, because we will produce the food, and God will protect this, because we will pray over all this food and get it to the tummies of these kids so that they have nutrition and they have hope in life.
Well, thank you, Mark. While we're not packing these meals in our facilities right now, we're asking all of our volunteers and supporters, donors, to continue to pray for Feed My Starving Children, to pray for the people that are receiving these meals, the kids in need around the world. Certainly to continue to give your financial resources. And our marketplace is still open. That is online. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. We are blessed to have an incredible group of donors and supporters for Feed My Starving Children. We are grateful for all that you've done for us, and will continue to do into the future. We're counting on you, and we know all these kids are counting on you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.